Hi everyone, I'm Maimah Karmo, your host for Breathe TV, a sacred space to share your breast cancer journey, to be educated, empowered, and learn to be your own best breast advocate. Today we're talking about the power of being engaged in your care plan. And when you hear the words you have breast cancer or any kind of cancer, it's so overwhelming to understand what's going to happen to you, what your diagnosis means, but there's power in being in control of your health and being as engaged as possible in your healthcare plan. Today you're going to meet two amazing people, Shawn, Bethea, who is a patient advocate and just in her own right a powerhouse, and Dr. Edith Perez, an amazing oncologist and a powerhouse herself. Dr. Perez, you've written over 700 articles and papers. Like, how do you do that? That's amazing.
I thought I would be a scientist when I was very, very young, actually, when my parents gave me a little microscope during Christmas one year. However, as I was in college, I realized that I wanted to do something that had more impact with human beings. So I switched to biology, then medicine.
Wonderful. Well, you're incredible. Shawn, you're a Crohn's disease survivor and warrior, right? Tell us about your journey and how you went from patient to advocate and warrior.
I was very young when I started experiencing symptoms. I was probably preteen. Most of my childhood, all I can remember is being sick. When I came into my early 20s and I started having surgeries and just started to live a very different lifestyle from those around me who were my age, I think that that's what encouraged me the most to start speaking up and advocating, because I didn't see anyone my age. I didn't see anyone my complexion. I didn't see anyone that I could relate to. It's been a journey, but I feel more empowered than ever now.
You know, Crohn's disease is something that's a silent disease, right? You don't see it, and it's not as well known as cancer or other diseases. It's a hard thing to have a disease that no one can see and touch, and you oftentimes suffer in silence. So I want you to talk about how you went from that child laying in bed, figuring this out, to being where you are, because it's not an easy journey.
Crohn's disease is an autoimmune disease. It's a form of inflammatory bowel disease. So just to kind of glaze over my journey, I was actually originally diagnosed with ulcerative colitis when I was very young. I think I was 17 when I was finally diagnosed. After a long hospital stay, a lot of missed school and everything, then unfortunately my disease kind of progressed and my diagnosis changed when I was in my early 20s. It largely affects your digestive system, but I mean, I've had various symptoms, various areas that I won't even get into. And as far as going from this small, very tired young woman into an empowered patient, a big part of it was not seeing people that looked like me, not seeing anyone who I could relate to. A big part of it was being lonely, and another big part of it was just being tired. I was kind of tired of being so passive, and I think that I was passive for such a long time, and I wasn't really engaged in my healthcare at all. I would just go along with things that I really didn't want to do or really wasn't comfortable with. And in the long run, it hurt me. I was spending a lot of time still sick. I was spending a lot of time at the doctor's office. They didn't know my preference because I really didn't express preferences as far as like treatments go, and I wasn't open at all. And I think that I just got very tired of not being collaborative. My healthcare just wasn't collaborative.
I want to maybe ask you to give yourself some grace as a mom, because my daughter for many years had symptoms like what you were talking about, and we had no idea what was happening. It began with migraines, and then she would start to faint and black out, have seizures, concussions. At school, they said she was being lazy. People just didn't understand what she was going through, and it was a very silent disease, and she looked beautiful and healthy, but she was suffering inside. And so she had no idea what was going on. I had no idea what was going on. And we did the same thing, went to doctor after doctor after doctor, and 2.5 years undiagnosed. And then after me being Dr. Google and being who I am as a patient advocate, you know, just staying up till 3, 4 in the morning, looking at things and figuring out like, what is going on with my child? Is she gonna die? Like, what is happening right now? She had no idea how to find her power at 13 years old, at 14 years old. So, you know, we finally got her diagnosed, and that was that what do we do next? And so I want you to honor that space of not knowing. It's not your fault. She was just exhausted and not knowing why. And then even when we found out, she was just tired being sick. And so I had to carry her for a long time. But you know what? Now she's a lot like you. She's such a badass. She's like running and she's speaking and she's sharing her story. So I want you to give that girl that grace because you're here now. And I think in that grace, you'll help those who are watching, who are where you are, give themselves that grace as well. So what got you from that place of like, I don't know what I'm doing, I can't do this, to being an advocate? What was that shift?
I think that when it changed, I was working in insurance and we had this like huge meeting. I was super exhausted and I was just trying to push through, much like many of us patients do. We tend to go to work and continue to push ourselves even though we are feeling our worst. A leader looked at me. He was like a manager of my manager. And he looked at me and he said, "You really need to go to the doctor." And he like expressed to me how okay it was for me to miss days of work, because I had never missed a day of work up until that point. And we actually had a doctor on site. So I went to our doctor on site and they actually sent me to the emergency room and I had surgery that night. That drew the line for me. And that was when I realized like, I really just have to start speaking my truth. I have to start, talking to my doctor about these things, being open and honest and really getting involved with my treatment plan.
That is a hard place to be, where you don't know what to do. And not till you end up in the ER do you now know that this is a serious issue. Thank you for sharing that and being so vulnerable in sharing that you didn't know what to do, right? That's okay too. Dr. Perez, so you're a researcher and you do a lot of work in science and work with organizations that are globally known. Can you share a bit about that and how you help patients to be better, more engaged in their care plan and even in research?
Certainly my interest to explore science, understanding the molecular underpinnings of cancer development, as well as, the growth of cancer, how therapies may help some patients, but not all patients. I feel it's critical that the patients feel engaged and advocates for themselves. As a physician and as a clinician investigator, I want to empower the patients to feel that we want them to be part of the process. And this process could be divided essentially into two areas. Number one, research. And then the second one is that we need to listen to the patients related to what's in their minds so that we can allow or provide an environment for patients to speak up and help us in the continuum of progress.
So a lot of your work's in health equity, right? Which, people of color have a lot of high disparities, don't have the right tools, don't have the right access, and there's so many barriers to care. So how do you help a patient of any level stay engaged?
It's critical for persons to realize that a lot of progress continues to be made in the management of patients and prevention of cancer, but not all of the improvements have translated into access for certain populations in the United States. So that's why health equity is very important, because we believe that as we make progress, this progress needs to involve all of the persons potentially affected. And that's why I'm so committed to work with groups such as Stand Up to Cancer, because we want to pioneer the patient advocacy model through participation in research. We want this groundbreaking research to include patients, to include advocates, because then we can listen to their needs, because we may have some ideas of what the needs are, but it's really better to work in a team approach. We encourage patient advocates to work with us to develop the appropriate clinical trials, to think about how to engage participation. And it's more than just participation and recruitment. Added to that is the fact that we want the patients' voices to be heard. And there's some specific projects, such as the Project Teach, to develop, online, advocate training programs, particularly with Black women, so that they have the tools to be advocates on cancer clinical trial teams.
I'm on Project Teach's advisory committee as well. They're doing great work.
I'm a big believer on, you can have an idea, but you want to involve others for increased impact.
No, I think that's a fantastic concept. But what they've done is really engage patients in the entire clinical trials process by helping them to understand what trials are. Being an engaged patient is not only about the treatments, about the trials, and about, even when cancer is quote unquote over, how you handle your life and manage that. Shawn, when you're kind of like trying to figure things out, that's one thing. When you kind of know, okay, here's the plan, that's the next thing, then there's a level of getting out there and sharing your story and becoming empowered. When your patient mindset changed, how did your behavior change towards self-advocacy?
When my mindset changed from this passive patient to now empowered and involved, I think that the biggest difference overall was just my confidence. Before, I was very ashamed of my surgeries, my scars, everything. And then I began taking pictures with my ostomy. I was so confident. I was confident talking about my condition, whereas before I would just lie. I would say that I was okay or say that I was sick, but I never really said that I actually had a chronic illness. So I would think that the biggest change was definitely the confidence.
And how did you interact with your care team differently? Because you mentioned before you weren't as active. Did you become more proactive with your healthcare team?
I became more proactive. I was more confident when I spoke. So I think that also helped when it came to meeting new providers and gaining that trust and really getting that respect, because trust goes both ways. I think that they trusted me to make my own decisions more, or they trusted that when I asked for something, when I wanted something, when I requested something, they trusted that I knew what I was talking about. I did my research, so it was more of a collaborative effort as opposed to them telling me something, I just agree and go along with it. We were definitely more of a team.
I know when I first heard the words, you have breast cancer, I talk a lot, I'm loud, I'm just like very active. I think, I move fast, talk fast, but I literally was like speechless. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't even find my driver's license that day. I don't know how I got to my mom's job to tell her I had cancer. I don't know how I got home. I didn't sleep the entire night. And then I went to my doctor, to figure out what's next. And they were saying all these words to me that I didn't understand. I didn't understand what an oncologist was versus a radiologist or a surgeon. I didn't understand any of these words. And they were asking me to make these choices that would change my life. I was kind of passive. I didn't know what to ask for. And so when I came out of it, where I finished treatment, I just lay there in bed and thought, this train came and hit me and ran me over. Thank God I'm still standing. How do I help other patients go through the journey more empowered? Knowing what to ask your doctor. What is this scan? Do I need it? What is it going to cost? What is my insurance going to cover? What is this genetic test? Can I have that? Why or why not? Is there more than one test? What is a clinical trial? Like, should I be in one? I knew I could have asked more, but I did what I could do with what I had at the time, right? So I never look back and say that I wasn't empowered. I did what I could do with what I had, but I want to help other people do better, because when you do know better, you do better, and you can have better outcomes. So I really applaud you on that, and I want you to really stand up in your power. You did all you knew to do, and you're here today, and you're standing up strong, and that's a big freaking deal. So Dr. Perez, in your journey with the research, I think really being empowered with your care plan also is being involved in research. How do you engage patients in research every day?
Almost 2 million people are diagnosed with cancer in the United States every year. At the same time, a lot of progress has been made, and there are more than 16 million people alive in the United States who had a previous diagnosis of cancer. So that group is the group of survivors. We want the group of survivors to continue to increase. We also want our medicines to be more precise in terms of us recommending the best therapy for the individual patient. And in order for us to continue making improvements, clinical trials are imperative. But people really tend not to think about clinical trials on a routine basis. So it's important that we have appropriate educational tools so that individuals feel that they have reliable sources to get information. Certainly, the National Cancer Institute has a great website with information. Mayo Clinic has a very good website with information related to cancer clinical trials. Stand Up to Cancer has outstanding resources available to everybody. As you both mentioned, having a diagnosis of cancer is overwhelming for anybody. So it's important to be empowered through education, utilizing reliable sources for that information. So clinical trials is just the way to go for many patients. And it's important for patients to be empowered to have some understanding of what they are, as well as talk to their physicians related to the potential of them participating in clinical trials and also the potential of them benefiting from the results.
So as you're talking, Dr. Perez, your body language is you're leaning into me, which is something that I totally love. A lot of physicians, doctors, and researchers don't do that. They don't lean into patients. And as you're talking about building trust and health equity and having that patient provider partnership, whether it's with a healthcare provider or a scientist or a researcher, like your body language and your facial expressions and all of that makes me as a person just meeting you wanting to lean in to listen, makes me trust you. And that's a big part of being engaged in your healthcare plan, right? It's knowing the person that you're looking at. Like when I was diagnosed, the first doctor I talked to said, just cut him off. That was his first, that's what he said to me. And the next one, was not as engaging. The next doctor was like you. I sat down in the chair with her and she pulled her chair so we were knee to knee. And she held my hands and she didn't talk for a minute and she just said, it's okay. And just breathe. And we just breathe. And she looked just like you right now. She was smiling at me and she's like, it's gonna be okay. You're okay. You're okay. And we just rocked back and forth like that for a little while. And she just talked to me and she looked me in the eye and she smiled at me and she said, I got you. I got you, you're safe. Before you're a patient, you're a person. And the way that you're talking about what you do, and I can tell that you're so compassionate by your energy and all that, is what we need to see in this space as patients of any kind of disease, chronic or terminal otherwise, to help patients of all colors and those who are especially facing disparities to have that faith in their providers. Dr. Perez, so engaging patients is a process. What's it look like to get a patient from maybe like scared and not knowing where their place is in that journey to becoming more empowered? How do you have a conversation about, empowerment and engaging in their care plan or in treatment process?
Education is really important. At the same time, I would like to mention an aspect that we haven't talked about today, which is the financial impact of a diagnosis of cancer or really any chronic disease. And I would like to highlight and mention, another foundation that I work with, which is the Donna Foundation. And this is a national foundation that was started actually by one of my patients at Mayo Clinic, Donna Deegan. And, 15 years ago or so, she started this foundation to provide financial support to patients. And the financial needs of patients have actually significantly increased over the last year with this, COVID-19 pandemic. And the Donna Foundation, has received a 68% increase in patient call volume requesting financial assistance. And it's very, I think, relevant to today's discussion of patient empowerment, that we think about empowerment, as part of the treatment or diagnosis portions or prevention of cancer. But we also have to empower patients to express their concerns related to a financial support that they may need as they go through the journey of managing a disease. As part of the Donna Foundation, we have actually a running event in Jacksonville, Florida every year. Started with a marathon, half marathon. Now it includes a 10K, a 5K, a 1 mile walk. And over the last year, we've had to do this virtually. But at the last event in February of 2021, there was a patient engagement panel that is actually available through the donnafoundation.org website, in which we addressed how to raise your voice advocating for health policy in a digital world, which is actually tremendously relevant to today's discussion.
No, I love what you just said, and I thank you for the reminder, because patient engagement is not in the care plan. It's not just only about my treatment journey. It's about how do I even get through the treatment financially, right? How do I leave my job if I'm getting paid, and even getting paid a full-time job, you run out of paid time off. If you're a single parent, that's a challenge there with daycare. If you're working an hourly wage job where your wages aren't covered, you could lose your job. There's a traveling to the oncology center, traveling to get radiation. There's co-payment, the cost of that. A lot of people go bankrupt sometimes or lose their homes over choosing treatment, right? So the financial implications are really, really high and really a challenge. But for some people, it's not just the finances. To your point, there's literacy issues, there's trauma issues. Shawn, what are some of the things that you learned about? We just talked about barriers to care. What are some things that were barriers for you that you had to run up against, that you had to overcome to stay as an engaged patient with your care plan?
I think that a lot of it was finances for sure. It was hard balancing my chronic condition on top of surgery and really expensive medications, things like that. Definitely education was a big thing. There was a lot of misinformation online, especially when you have any chronic illness, but digestive diseases for some reason. There's always a cure that someone's selling, so education was a big thing. Not all providers, not all healthcare facilities are created equally, and I unfortunately had to learn that the hard way. So a lot of barriers there.
Tell me what that means.
Because I was diagnosed young, I had no idea what an autoimmune disease was. I didn't know that there were doctors that actually specifically specialize in my condition, and I didn't know that we actually have centers for my condition. For a long time, I was seeing a general gastroenterologist who did not specialize in me. And I didn't even realize that for years. And I didn't learn that until I became more active in the community and I actually made friends who have my condition. And that was actually when I learned, hey, you can go to a center that only sees patients like you. Definitely, once you make that change, the care is significantly different. And of course, they were all very nice providers at both facilities, but the care is definitely different when you are with a provider that only sees patients that have your condition and actually specializes in your condition.
Yeah, it's a lot to carry on your shoulders, responsibility-wise, when you're that young, right? And I want to applaud you and the people who are watching right now, who are young people. I know my daughter's watching right now from the other room, and it's a lot to shoulder when you have school and you have friends and you want to get out of the house and you have people that you want to spend time with. But once you're diagnosed, just like, medications, there's the treatments, there's the responsibility of your actions are going to impact your quality of life. And you just want to be a kid and have fun, right? Whether it's chronic disease or whether it's cancer, your life just changes in 1 minute. And you have to make all these choices that are going to change your life, and it's really challenging. And so, for you guys who are watching on Facebook or whatever on social media, please feel free to chime in, comment, share what it felt like responsibility-wise when you realized that you had this illness, and how you were able to overcome that emotionally, because it is hard when you just want to live your life and be free, and you're like, oh no, why is this happening to me right now? What do I do next? For you, how did you overcome the feeling of that responsibility? Or did you just want to live with it and realize this is my, I hate this word, new normal, but it's my new, whatever it is, it's your new life. What did you do to overcome that level of it's too much to get to, I can do this?
I had to meet people that had my condition. And before I did that, I did not know how to navigate life. I did not know how to balance friendships or going out or just being the person that I was, because I was so overwhelmed with my symptoms, with my treatment, with constantly being at the doctor, with always being at the hospital. So a big part of me overcoming this mindset and this reality of my condition is really all I know was definitely when people surrounded me and said hey, I have this and this is what I do. Hey, I have this and, I actually did what you aim to do. I always used to worry about whether I would be able to have kids or whether I would be able to have a normal anatomy after surgery and things like that. And I actually met people who had my surgeries and who had kids. So just seeing that and seeing people actually thriving with my condition, it just gave me something to aspire to be.
Yeah, that's so true. I feel like for me, when I got diagnosed, there was no such thing. There's no really any young adult cancer group. There was maybe one or two where I didn't know what they were. And there were all these people who were just like me. They all had cancer or had missing body parts. And it was oh my God, testicular cancer, breast cancer, brain cancer. I felt for the first time, I felt not alone, because people that love me could support me, but they couldn't understand exactly how I felt. And so I think for me, really meeting people like that who got it and who were making a difference or wanted to, really empowered me to be a more engaged patient, because I knew that I wasn't alone. Because even as I was beginning Tigerlily, people were like, what's Tigerlily? Like, what is that? What are you gonna do with that thing? And I didn't know, I just knew I wanted to share my story. To me, being an engaged patient, it's hard when you're in that treatment journey part, just starting out. But giving patients tools like tip sheets on what to ask your doctor, what questions to ask about fertility, trials, and how to pick the right doctor, like Dr. Perez. Like, she's awesome. She's a rock star. You are. But also when you find your people, to your point, your tribe, that supports you and understands you, that is one of the most empowering things that you can have in your life. And having friends who may not have had cancer, but who say, you know what, I want to sit with you in your discomfort. I want to sit with you in your fear. Because, a lot of times people want you to be better. They want you to get over that, just be on the other side, and or it takes a long time to get to the other side. Even when treatment ends, you're still not there yet. You're dealing with, okay, I had cancer, treatment's ended, but I have no treatment going forward. What do I do next? There are no more doctors every week or every month. Like, is it going to come back? That's, for me, I think the hardest part. So again, I think having people around you was really important. Dr. Perez, with your work with Stand Up to Cancer, you have a huge patient support network. You guys do a lot of media and awareness campaigns. Stand Up to Cancer is one of the preeminent organizations globally giving patients power and tools to be able to stand up to every disease. Like how you're looking at me and leaning in, and I to you. How do you help people make that shift where they're working together in tandem as a team?
Probably by exemplifying respect for others in the context of the continuum of what needs to be done. And my view is that there's not a person that is better than another person. We're just different in what we can bring to the table. We just have different areas of expertise. If we have persons like Shawn, you go through something, but actually you look beyond yourself. You're trying to utilize your experience to help others. And I tell you, if more people did this, we will be in a much better place overall.
You were a little girl who got a microscope for her birthday or something, and look where you are today. I can imagine you with like pigtails right now, getting that and going, what is this, mommy?
Yeah, we always thank my parents for giving me the blue box that I loved so much from the very beginning. And I've developed, this commitment over the years. It's what can I do to really leverage science, to have an impact in many people around the world. Also participating as part of education. And this is one of the things that we do at Stand Up to Cancer so well. The website of Stand Up to Cancer really is very good. I encourage people to take a little bit of time to take advantage of what's out there already, so that you don't have to feel like you're treading water. There's a raft out there where you can hop on. So it's a matter of respect in my view, and realizing that there's not a single person who can solve everything. But gosh, if we can work together, we'll be much farther ahead.
That is so true. Working together would get us so much further ahead. That is so beautiful and so valid and so true. And for those of you guys who are watching again, people always say to me, you can't boil the ocean and you can't save the world. And I say, I do every day, one step at a time. It starts with sharing your story, using your voice, not taking no for an answer, and not giving up. And it's not about you building a nonprofit. It's about being a little girl getting a microscope for her birthday and going, okay, I like this microscope, but how could I use this to learn more and do better? I mean, how do we empower girls to be in STEM? I certainly never imagined I would be sitting here today interviewing amazing people like yourselves. I got breast cancer and I laid in bed and thought, if I just close my eyes and dream, what would that dream look like if it grew? And it was one thing at a time. And I had no money, I had no board, I had no idea of cancer, science, advocacy, research. It just takes a curious mind and a mind that won't give up. So I really applaud your parents for giving you that microscope on your birthday. I could just see you right now, literally in pigtails. I know this picture out there with you with pigtails on, with it in your hand in a blue box. So that's amazing. Shawn, as you've gone through your health journey, has your interest in advocacy evolved in terms of, like I've seen patients who've been advocates and then get more involved in science and want to know about clinical trials. And then, at some point you see your doctor and you're an equal partner. Like you become bolder, to Dr. Perez's point, in yourself. Because I knew I went in like this, and then I was like this, and now I'm like, listen, So Yes, girl power, girl power. Yeah. So tell me how you have grown in your journey as an engaged patient with your provider and healthcare team.
For sure. Well, exactly what you did right there was like every bit of me. I first came in and I was like this, literally I was a child, but I was very intimidated. Even into my early 20s, I was still very intimidated. And I couldn't talk to my doctor really. I kind of just went along with anything. If they asked me how I was doing, I would say fine. I never really said my real struggles, my real concerns. Going from that point and then meeting people and educating myself, that was a new stride. That was like, okay, I think that I can do this. And that's when I started to get more involved in like, what does my condition entail? And then what are my options? So very much the research stage, but more of the research as far as my options and my condition. And I wanted to understand my condition better. From there, my advocacy kind of evolved from a support system to, hey, I want people to know this information too. I want other people to have this good, accurate information. And I started partnering with pharma companies as well as healthcare providers to get information out there, whether it was a blog post or a social initiative.
That's a whole other level of advocacy. Working with pharma companies and in social media and sharing, that's a lot of work because you were doing work with clinical trials, with sharing about, different treatments. And how do you get there? How do you make that happen?
Honestly, like I'm still baffled by it to this day because I just don't understand how I got from point A to point B. I guess it started with just being so transparent that these companies actually started to reach out to me. And it started with an ad board. So we were just advising a pharmaceutical company on how they should talk to patients, what we need to hear as far as like our specific condition goes and what is insulting, because there is a lot of insulting stuff out there. That's how I started partnering with pharma. And from there, just keeping that transparency, that professional transparency, but just being that voice for my community, other opportunities really just started to present themselves, which led me into meeting Jen Haranja from Savvy Cooperative. So then I started with Savvy this year, but I actually originally started off as a co-owner back in the day, and we connect patients. Right now we're working with Amazon for a huge project, helping those products get out there and making sure that they're including patients with stutters. Getting this opportunity was insane, and just partnering with these trusted clients and working on things like this, huge things that you wouldn't even think about the process to create. I never really thought about the process of Google Home and how it became. And I never would think, hey, patients are behind this, making sure that this is disability inclusive. So yeah, I mean, I love what I do. And honestly, every step that I took to get here, I wouldn't skip over one.
That's so beautiful. And I really think that's a place I want to just kind of hold a space for that because, we start the journey where we don't know where we're going. We don't know our voices. We don't know how to use them. And when we first began talking, you're talking about not knowing how to navigate your journey. And now you're advising global companies on their strategy, on their plans to help other patients better go through their journey. That deserves a lot of applause. Yes.
Thank you.
It does. I'm so proud of you. That's amazing. Advocacy takes different forms. There's advocacy of sharing your story. There's advocacy of doing policy work. There's advocacy of working for a nonprofit. There's advocacy of advising pharma, other industry partners and stakeholders on how to better treat patients, engage patients, serve patients, support caregivers, children, loved ones. It's a huge and broad space to be in, and it's really powerful. Same thing, I advise a lot of my partners in ways that I never thought I could advise them. I didn't think I knew anything enough to advise anybody, right? And now I'm on different calls all the time. And so I'm really proud of you, and I just love seeing your evolution in the conversation just the past hour. It's just been so amazing hearing you talk about what you do and seeing you kind of rise up in your feminine power and strength. Dr. Perez, for you, where are you from, by the way? I have to ask.
I was born in Puerto Rico.
Yes, Puerto Rico. Love it.
Yeah, beautiful place. Yes.
Yeah, and I'm sure many little girls and other women and people like myself look up to you because that journey coming to this country and being an immigrant, whether it's first generation or before that, to go through the system of getting through education and then figuring out your next step in life and becoming a researcher and a scientist. And now being one of the preeminent, people in research and in medicine, it's really amazing. I thank you for your service and for your compassion and for your time. If you could tell a little girl watching, a woman who's young watching this right now, how to go from fear to fearless and how to be empowered and speak up, what would you say to that person?
The world is open with lots of possibilities. Look at yourself, but look around you. Seek out, what's out there and go for it. Also, I would advise that the little girl realizes that she's not alone in the world. She may feel alone at times, but there's so many others out there who will be willing to give a hand, provide advice, and also to enjoy each day. I've thought about this a lot. Some people, I fear, live doing things that they don't like to do because they think, in 10 years it'll be better. I tell you, I think we better enjoy each single day. It's one step at a time. But gosh, be happy today and do whatever you can today to enjoy the day. You feel sometimes intimidated, by having a disease and seeking health care. I advise everybody to write questions at home. Bring the list of questions with you to your medical visit. Bring a friend, bring a relative with you, and that will help with empowerment. Gosh, life is here to be taken.
I love that. Life's here for the taking. It is, it is. And I just so glad that we met. You really inspire me. I came here at 15 years old as a refugee from Liberia with one suitcase alone. And I remember getting off the plane in New York and I was terrified. And in my mind, I'm still that little girl who's 15 years old all the time. And I'll be like, no, I've come so far, but I never stopped being curious. I never stopped asking questions. I never stopped thinking that I could change the world. And I just keep going and moving forward. And it's been an amazing journey. And to your point, we have to live life every single day. And so, Shawn, for you, before we sign off, what would you tell a young person or anybody going through this journey? How would you empower them and give them a gift that can last them for a lifetime?
I would say just there are no bad questions and there is no right way to be ill. Just go through your journey, take it day by day. As Dr. Perez said, every day matters. So take it one day at a time.
What you just said, though, was really powerful. You said there's no right way to be ill. And if there's not any way to be ill that's right. It's really about believing in yourself, asking the right questions, going to your doctor empowered, finding a team that you trust, who trusts you, that believes in you and loves you. That's the first step. And so again, be educated, be empowered, and be your own best advocate. Until next time, be well. Brought to you in partnership with Puma Biotechnology.